The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Remember when Vancouver used to be a goalie graveyard? We're a goalie factory now, baby.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a Canucks writer since 2013. Wow, currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you. I'm talking to you for tuning into Locked On Canucks. You want to know why? Because it is your Canucks every damn day. We're part of that Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing the most for sports fans across the world. And for our show, if you haven't done so already, what are you waiting for? Make sure you give a like, go subscribe, go follow us for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And, you know, we got to make the tens of dollars here on Locked On Canucks. And we do that because of you, but also because of our sponsors. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms, if they do apply. Are there terms on the Vancouver Canucks according to the hockey gods? Because, hey, I've said it time and time again. I think this has been the most cursed franchise in the NHL since they entered the NHL back in 1970-71. And for a long time, the goaltending in this market was also cursed, with Brian Burke touting Vancouver as a goalie graveyard. Well, you know what? We are over 20 years removed from that. So let's talk about how the Vancouver Canucks escaped the notion of being a goalie graveyard and look at the present too. Are there parallels between Artur Shilovs and Corey Schneider? And we'll also give a bit of a ranking in terms of the Canucks goaltenders in the 21st century. I'm Trevor Beggs, the co-host of Locked On Canucks. Kyle, he's in traffic. He'll join shortly, but we got to get rocking and rolling, okay? And I should say as well, we also got another segment of Canucks Citizen coming up. Fan Friday, whatever we want to call it. We're still figuring that out. Working titles going on. And Andrew will be joining the show to talk about goaltending and everything else regarding your Vancouver Canucks. One stat I wanted to throw out regarding the Canucks goaltending, right? So, again, for a long time, considered a goalie graveyard, especially in the early 2000s, the late 90s. And, you know, you could even argue for when they were bad, they were still giving up a lot of goals, but the goaltending overall was still pretty good. So I ran some numbers. And when I say run some numbers, I was on NHL.com for a few minutes. But the Canucks rank in the same no matter what time frame I use. So if you want to go post-lockout in 04-05 or even all the way back to 1990-2000, the Canucks have allowed the 10th fewest goals in the NHL over a 20 to 25-year period. Pretty damn good. And it kind of makes sense because really, if you look at the numbers, especially regular season numbers, the Canucks have had some of the best goaltending in the NHL ever since really Felix Potvin. And, you know, I think this goaltending graveyard era was really the time between when Kirk McLean was traded and then when the Canucks required Alberto Luongo. But I even think if you want to include regular season, it goes back to Dan Cloutier. If you look at Dan Cloutier's numbers, you know, the Canucks had above average goaltending. They've had above average goaltending in almost every single NHL season since about the early 2000s. I mean, Felix Potvin was a bit of a disaster here. He had below average numbers, but, you know, Dan Cloutier, he was posting numbers that are above average at a time where, you know, goaltenders were giving up. You know, it was the dead puck era, but Cloutier's numbers were kind of right around league average, even above league average. But where this notion of goaltending graveyard, I think, comes up is twofold in the early 2000s, at least. I think it's the backup position. You know, we got some of our favorite names there that didn't post great stats, right? You know, like the Bob Essens, the Peter Skudra, the Maxime Ouellette, even, you know, guys like Braden Holtby, Spencer Martin. There's lots of guys with some pretty subpar save percentages in there. But in terms of starting netminders, I mean, there's been lots of talent, right? And I know I'm picking on Cloutier a bit because it's really, where did this goaltending graveyard end? When did the Canucks become immortal in terms of being a goalie factory and not a goalie graveyard? And again, I do think Dan Cloutier, during the regular season at least, did his part to end the goaltending graveyard notion. Now, where that changes in the playoffs, right? Dan Cloutier in the playoffs has one of the worst save percentages in Canucks history. And I'll kind of break down the numbers here, because here's the two ends of the spectrum here for me. Dan Cloutier, among 15 goaltenders in Canucks history to play a playoff game, has the second worst save percentage, which says something, because there's guys in there like, Peter Skudra, who only played 2 games, and he's, about 890. Eddie Lack didn't perform well in his 4 playoff games, but Dan Cloutier has a ghastly .872 save percentage in 25 playoff games. I mean, if you want to look at why the West Coast Express era didn't go past the second round, and I hate to pick on Dan Cloutier, but I'm picking on him here, a big part of that is because of Dan Cloutier. And Hell of a Shot has it here with the comment, the infamous picture of Dan Cloutier with the soccer ball between his legs. I know Kyle's told the story before on this program, but Kyle's handle on Twitter and I think on the old Canuck forums was Cloutier's 5-hole for the longest time, for good reason too. But obviously things have turned around, okay? The Canucks acquire Luongo. They get Schneider. Miller was good. Markstrom was good. Demko's been great. And even now with Shilovs too. I was looking at something from The Athletic, and I think there's a good argument that the Canucks have the most cost-effective goaltending tandem in the NHL, if not the best goaltending tandem in the NHL. I think in terms of competitors, maybe Dallas, if Jake Ottinger finds his game. New York's certainly up there with Shesterkin and Quick. The Islanders are up there with Sorokin and Varlamov. But your Vancouver Canucks, there's a chance here with Demko and Shilovs that they could have the next Ullmark and Swayman tandem. There's that kind of talent level there with Artur Shilovs and Thatcher Demko. And, Thatcher Demko, health is obviously a big question. But when you have a guy now behind him like Shilovs, who isn't just your typical backup who's going to play every week or two, I think Shilovs is a guy they can trust. And to me, I think one of the big fatal flaws of the Canucks last season was that stretch in January and February where they just didn't play Casey DeSmith for like a month. The Canucks can't have that this season. They can't have it. Because, look, Shilovs, he performed great in the playoffs. We all saw that. But, again, he could have been better if Thatcher Demko was in net. And I know Casey DeSmith struggled there in the mid part of the season, but this coaching staff, they just cannot overplay Thatcher Demko. They can't. The guy hasn't made it through a full season as an NHL starter yet, which is crazy to say. The dude, might I remind you, was drafted 10 years ago. 10 years ago. I had no bags under my eyes 10 years ago. I looked like this, all right? Isn't that a better looking guy right there? Come on. Unbelievable stuff. But look, I mean, one of the other things I did want to point out here when I talk about the goaltending conversation, and we'll make sure we continue this on the other side with Andrew and maybe Kyle if he shows up, hopefully if Kyle shows up. The Canucks in the playoffs. So I mentioned that they've allowed the 10th fewest goals in the regular season since the turn of the millennium. It's a different story in the playoffs. And sure, a lot of that is on our friend Dan Cloutier there. But, Roberto Luongo had his off moments in the playoffs. We all know that. Miller wasn't great. Even Shilovs has been below average in terms of the raw numbers. Auld was below average when he was in the playoffs. So, the Canucks it's been a little iffy in the playoffs in terms of the goals they've allowed. But if we look at goals allowed, goals against per game in the playoffs, since the turn of the millennium, the Canucks ranked 26th overall. 26th overall, allowing 2.92 goals per game in their 135 playoff games. And now that 2.92 goals against per game, that's about a league average number nowadays. But when you go back to the West Coast Express era and the opportunities pissed away, yeah, I'm still pissed off at Dan Cloutier, okay? You can see my trauma coming out here. Again, the Canucks on too many occasions had below average goaltending. And it's interesting to see some of the teams below them. I mean, the Coyotes, Kraken, Blue Jackets, and Jets have not played a ton of playoff games, although interesting to see the Jets there considering who they've had in net. But the Oilers and Panthers are also the two teams that are right below the Canucks. And the Oilers as well, I know they had that run with Dwayne Rolison in net, but they've been burned by goaltending more often than not. The Florida Panthers, I think they're biased too because they didn't really play playoff games in an era where scoring was lower. They played in the higher scoring eras. So, the Vancouver Canucks, they have gone from a goaltending graveyard to a goaltending factory. And I do think it's going to continue moving forward. Because, again, who knows what's going to happen with Thatcher Demko, but he is on a sweetheart deal for 2 more seasons. I'm not a believer in trading that guy. I don't think you're going to get fair value for that. And Archer Shilovs, I think you got 2 years to kind of prove that you're ready to be an elite NHL starter. And if that's not the case, then I think you go with Thatcher Demko 2 years from now. But, my optimism about the Canucks being a goaltending factory it is really on Demko and Shilov, because in the pipeline right now, there isn't a whole lot that intrigues you, right? They got Ty Young, middling numbers in the AHL, or WHL, I should say. Aku Koskin-Cuovo, 22 years old, has yet to become a starter at Harvard. I think Nikita Tolopilo is definitely the most intriguing Canucks goaltending prospect in a thin prospect pool there. But let's go from 1 to 3 on the other side, okay? Again, give me your thoughts about the Canucks becoming a goaltending factory, okay? Is that the case? And when did that turn? Was it at Dan Cloutier? Was that Roberto Luongo? When did we turn from a goaltending graveyard to a goaltending factory? And maybe if we have some time, maybe I'll give some rankings in terms of, Canucks goaltenders throughout the 21st century here. But again, first and foremost, let's go from 1 to 3 on the other side, baby. Andrew, Kyle Bowen, joining the show after we shouted our friends over at Game Time. All right, you've heard me say it before, especially if you're an everydayer, even if you're an occasional listener. But if you're a first-time listener, I got to tell you that Game Time is the only place that you should be buying tickets, okay? Whether you want to go check out some Canucks like Andrew, or you want to check out a Magic Mike show like Kyle Bowen, you make sure you go find those tickets on Game Time, okay? You know why I got to use Game Time? Because they got the lowest price guarantee, baby. Lowest price guarantee. That means that no one else is going to beat the prices that they offer. And they got that all-in pricing too, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, okay? You know what you're paying for. And, if you're looking to find tickets at the last minute, Game Time's got your back for that too. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And maybe you can even go see a Magic Mike show. All that and more on Game Time, so make sure that you go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. We're back here on Locked On Canucks. You got me, Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen in from the traffic, and Andrew, the most important guy on the show, one of the OGs of Locked On Canucks. We appreciate you, buddy, and we're
Morning,
excited.
gentlemen.
Andrew, what's going on, buddy? How you doing today?
Not much, man. Not much. Just a diehard fan for 32 odd years now. And I'm with you. We've been a goalie graveyard for too long. Even Luongo, let's be honest. We chased that guy out of this town. If
Okay.
For me, I've been looking at the stats of, Luongo, Demko, Silos, and Snyder. I kind of feel like we have that same caliber of goaltending. And for me, what really jumps out when I looked at them is in the early years, even Luongo, he had 20 starts, but 7 wins with 14 losses. Corey Snyder, 5 starts, 2 wins. Then you start going over to people like Demko, 1 start, 1 win. These are all their first years. And then Silovs, 5 starts, 3 wins. Those are stuff that, to me, really speaks volume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? The playoffs maybe didn't start off great for Luongo and Schneider there. And Demko, I got to mention Demko's save percentage in the playoffs, because it is crazy that, it feels like Demko's been around forever now. He still only started 4 playoff games for your Vancouver Canucks. He's played 5 career playoff games. He has a .974 save percentage in
Which
the playoffs so far. I know that's bubble Demko mixed with 1 game against the Nashville Predators, but I think that's something we might be underestimating in this market is how good can Thatcher Demko be if he plays for an entire playoff run? And Kyle, let's get your thoughts on that, buddy, because it's nice to see your face and hear your voice again.
Yeah, I think Thatcher Demko, he's that guy, man. I think I always hear Thomas Drance talk about this, and it makes a lot of sense, right? One love to Andrew, by the way, for hopping on here. One love to all the fans. But Thomas Drance always talks about how he believes when Demko is at the top of his game, he's able to be unbeatable pretty much for like 30 game stretches. Like he's just that damn good. And if he can unlock that level of play in the beginning of the playoffs, which honestly could have been the case this year based on what he did in game 1 against Nashville, right? Like he made some big saves. He was doing his thing. He kind of looked like Bubble Demko. Dude, it could have happened. And we've seen it happen so many times before, but more specifically speaking, I feel like when people bring up goaltenders getting hot in the playoffs, sometimes they like to only bring up like, oh, the Yarrow Halaks, or look at what this goalie did and these miraculous Cam Ward, blah, blah, blah. But yo, look at what Vasilevsky did for years and years and years. And you can get the exact same thing from Thatcher Demko. I believe that.
Yeah, I think Thatcher Demko, again, you know me, Kyle, I've been the biggest Thatcher Demko believer for a long time, long before Locked On Canucks, back on the old network. And Andrew too. Andrew's shaking his head, right? It's Thatcher Demko has just been that guy, the draft profile, what he did in Boston College, what he did in the AHL. Honestly, his mentality, the fact that he has a psych degree, I think there's so many reasons why Demko can be one of the best goaltenders in the world and is one of the best goaltenders in the world. I think the only question mark is his health, right?
Yeah.
And that is just so hard to predict. But everything you hear from Rick Tocchet to Ian Clark is that, Thatcher Demko is a bit of a freak in terms of taking care of his body, in terms of the health, the preparation. And there is a bit of injury luck as well, right? Like, I was thinking about it this morning, like in with the Seattle Seahawks, a guy like Rashad Penny, no injuries in college, all of a sudden he gets to the NFL.
Don't be freaking comparing Rashad Penny to Thatcher Demko,
I'm just saying, bad luck happens in terms of
man?
injuries. Bad luck happens in terms of injuries.
Talk about Bob Orr. Talk about Bob Orr if you're comparing injury significance, okay, with Thatcher Demko. Unbelievable, man. Your Seattle Seahawks bias. Come on, man. Rashad Penny, unreal. Okay, so on this note of goaltending, and I want to throw this over to Andrew, or just injuries in goaltending and injuries in Demko, okay? Rutherford, last week did talk about kind of the things that Trevor just talked about, right? Demko being like this freak athlete, this try-hard, this ultra-competitive dude, and Rutherford also touched on how that might be a little concerning, and he may have to tone that down a bit. It's not only a games play thing with Demko and Tocchet and the coaching staff. It's also managing what he does outside of game time. And I feel as if that's going to be a hard conversation to have with a super competitive guy.
I think it comes down to his teammate. When he had last year, he didn't have to worry so much about his backup. But having a young guy come in there, it's going to give him more opportunity to sit and talk and think about stuff rather than just focusing on that gameplay. I think having a young guy, and I mean, like even Luongo, when Corey Snyder came in and was his backup, he was more focused on helping Corey Snyder do well and doing better himself. And I think with the limitation on his games, I mean, over 50 games, if you look at Demko's stats, he's struggled or been injured or other shit has happened. Where, sorry guys.
No, you can, don't worry about it.
But anyways, you have somebody like Archo Silovs in the background who, with Ian Clark is showing that he's that. I mean, I'm comparing to other Vancouver goalies, but he's up there with that Luongo caliber. I mean, his opening seasons, he was a bit better, right?
Yeah.
And not to mention, you throw a kid like that into the playoffs, you don't have very much expectations, but look what he did.
Oh, dude, she loves his calm, cool, collected. He's a mother effer, man. I can tell, man. Like going to Game 7, and you can talk about the Cody Ceci goal and whatever, right? From the point, and like everyone likes to point out, like, oh, that Artur Shelovs is not ready. He can't even handle point shots yet. Blah blah blah, bro. This guy's playing the Edmonton Oilers, and he's just doing splits. He's doing whatever it takes to keep the puck out of his net. High pressure situation, Game 7 in Rogers Arena, and he delivered that type of performance. I feel as if the Canucks were outshot like 27-4 at one point. You know what I'm saying? And he was doing whatever it took to keep his team in the game. And what happened? We almost actually tied up the game. It's unreal. Now, this whole Shelovs Demko thing, it's going to be spectacular. But while we have Andrew here, we're going to be talking about goaltenders. I kind of want to bring it back to Luongo again. Okay. I think if we are going to do any type of goaltending talk with any of our fans, it's always nice to go back to 2011 and ask this question. Do you blame Roberto Luongo for losing that 7-game series against Boston? Because I think he allowed 30 goals in that series.
I feel like we played with an injured team. I mean, look at the Sedins, look at Bieksa, look at Kessler. They were all injured. Every single one of our main players was injured that year. And that's because we ran into a Boston team that just out-hit us. If we can continue with the physical play, we've got a lot of it's unproven, but with Quinn Hughes and Hronek combo, our defense is better than it's ever been, in my opinion.
Ooh, okay. Trevor, how about you, man? Do you still hold a little bit of a vendetta against the executive Stanley Cup champion, Roberto Luongo? Because goaltending, Vancouver, we talk about it being a factory, but again, sometimes I do attach myself to like, holy ish. Luongo against Chicago for a couple years. Luongo against Boston. It was just like, whoa, that was not good. That was catastrophic.
Yeah, to be honest, I think Andrew's point is probably the primary one, right? The Canucks were pretty banged up. But that being said, Lou choked in some big games, right? He certainly came up big, with the shutout against Boston in Game 5, the shutout in Game 1. But there were quite a few playoff moments where Lou choked as well. Now, I think that's why there's such a complicated relationship with him in Vancouver, because he has that save against Patrick Sharp in Game 7 of overtime against the Blackhawks, right? Like, where are the Canucks without that save? Where they was at the 2 shutouts that took him to Game 7 of the Cup Finals. But the flip side, again, like multiple chokes against Chicago in multiple series across multiple years, chokes against Boston in Game 7 there. So there are some black marks on Luongo's record. I'm not blaming him for the fact that they didn't win the Cup, but I'm blaming him in part for the fact that they didn't win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, now throwing it back to the present or the future, it's safe to say from my point of view, and Begsy did bring up, Demko's psyche and I'm paraphrasing, but his stoicism, excuse me. But I feel as if Demko's never going to give that to us. You know what I'm saying? I think Luongo's ability to put so much pressure on himself ultimately broke him at times where, I don't know, I don't see that a part of Demko's aura. There's just something so calm, cool about him. I know Trevor's been around him in the dressing room. There's something that just oozes, don't worry, I got this. And there was even that moment where, was he talking to the media during the playoffs when he was coming back from injury or something? Like, I just remember him being in a media scrum and him just having this attitude about him, this confidence about him. I don't remember if that was before Game 1 against Nashville or if it was like towards the end of the Oilers series, but there's just a different energy to this guy, and it's a damn shame that we haven't been able to really encapsulate that because of the lack of playoff time we've had with him.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I like Demko and Shilovs is I think they both have a very similar mental makeup, right? You could argue right now that Demko and Shilovs have a chance to be the best goaltending tandem in Canucks history. And that's saying something because since we've been a goalie graveyard, we've had Roberto Luongo and Corey Schneider, and to a lesser extent for a short period of time, Markstrom and Demko, or even Miller and Lack. Those are all good tandems, but Luongo and Schneider are the goats of Canucks goaltending tandems. Demko and Shilovs could be up there though, right? And again, when I look at, Luongo had a bit of a hot-headed nature. Jacob Markstrom certainly had a bit of a hot-headed nature. Demko and Shilovs are two of the most calm, cool, collected guys out there. I mean, you got Mr. Psych Degree in Demko, and Mr. Gets Married at 18 years old and Archer Shilovs. I mean, man, oh man.
Unreal.
What a guy there.
Unreal,
you know what? Let's take a break here and wrap up the show on the other side. Andrew, stick around if you got some time, buddy.
Sure.
Maybe
I'm in no rush.
we'll kind of branch out the conversation a bit to a couple more wide-reaching topics, let's call it. And Kyle, gotta give your voice some time to rest there, buddy. What was going on this morning?
Add one more. Go ahead, Ad.
It's all good. I was just going to add that 2011 year, Luongo started 60 games. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, where you got to split that up a bit more. You can't have Demko playing 60 games. That being said, he did post a 911 save, or 211 goal against and 928 save percentage. So
holy.
With 60 starts, you can't, you know what I mean? Like,
blessed, man. Sounding like Trevor's ball hockey goalie, to be honest. Anyways, who we shout out on the other before we get to the other side, Trevor?
We got no one to shout out except for Andrew. Thanks for hopping on, buddy. And hey, if you got a business and you want to sponsor the show, we are looking for advertisers going into the season. So if you want to make me your biatch and have me do an ad read for you, hit us up, okay? Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. Back on the other side.
People, we back doing this, and that's talking goalies on July 31st. I didn't even know there was 31 days in July, man, until this morning. I thought it was August 1st today, man. Anyways, Locked On Canucks here at the Don't Does Art Lab, the place that gives you that West Coast bias. We got Andrew, we got Trevor, and we got Kyle. Hey, speaking of Andrew, he's a part of the Discord community. Hit the link in the bio. It's one of the best places, in my opinion, to talk Canucks, right? While you're on the toilet. It's going to start ramping up pretty soon because August is here, which means September is here, which means training camp is here, which means your favorite hockey team that is finally good again is back on the ice. And honestly, I kind of want summer to end so I can get there ASAP. Now, let's get to some comments before Trevor starts nerding out about some other things regarding goaltenders. And I love this comment right here, okay, from Hell of a Shot, okay? I think I actually got the wrong one there, but he was talking about how it was kind of cringe right here. Hell of a Shot. It was kind of cringe when I found out that the Canucks had Dan Cloutier as a goaltending coach a couple years ago. Like, I don't remember that moment in Canucks history. Like, I remember he got hired. Was that because Ian Clark was not working for Jim Benning? Like, what happened around that time, Trevor? Can you confirm or?
Yeah, Ian Clark was no longer with the team at the time. So September 2012, Cloutier was hired by the Canucks as a goaltending consultant, mainly to work with the AHL goalies. And then on June 14th, 2016, he'd been named the team's goaltending coach. During the 2018 offseason, Clark returned and Cloutier was reassigned for development, and then he left the organization in 2019. So I did kind of forget about that, right? Cloutier was in the organization for 7 years there, 2012 to 2019 in different roles. So, I mean, I don't want to give Cloutier too much credit there because at the end of the day, you know, Ian Clark came in 2018, which was Thatcher Demko's, I believe the first season he cracked the NHL was 2017-18, playing one game that year. And, you know, Ian Clark and Demko have been tied at the hip, right? You know, and Ian Clark's contract also expires in 2 years when Demko's contract expires. They both signed 5-year deals a couple of seasons
How much do you think Ian Clark gets paid? Do you think Ian Clark gets paid like $3 million a year, $2 million a year? Like, do you think it's up there? No. Or is it less? Damn, but he's such a vital part.
I think it's 6 figures, but I couldn't confirm that.
They probably bring the Brinks truck.
Dude, of course, man. He's such an important part to all of this. Like,
they were paying him Luongo's buyout penalty.
Oh, there you go, man. Honestly speaking, if Demko wins a Vezina and ends up winning a Stanley Cup, like, I wonder if Ian Clark is for like another 10 to 15 years, if he's gonna somehow get his way into like some small part of the Hockey Hall of Fame. No, for real. Like, this guy's a guru, man. Because didn't he work in Columbus too? And wasn't he working with like Bobrovsky and stuff? So, like, this guy's a legend, bro.
Yeah, Ian Clark's been around a long time. Maybe arguably the MVP of your Vancouver Canucks. But I kind of want to go a bit more rapid fire here, to be honest. And Andrew, I'm curious. You know, maybe not the MVP of the Canucks last season, but who was your favorite player to watch on the Vancouver Canucks
Miller.
last season?
Miller by far. Not even a. You know what? From losing Horvat to going full in on Miller, just the amount of pressure he's had to take for this team, and then just carry it and excel and bust 100. You can't argue, man.
Dude, he's a man. I feel like you and JT Miller would have the same hoodie, man. For real.
Probably.
He just seems like you're the type of guy, yo. For real. Straight up, JT Miller's just a man, bro. You know, I think I'm 31 and a half. Trevor's 31 and a half. I don't know how old you are, but JT Miller's like 33. So JT Miller's what, 31 or 32 as well?
Yeah,
like, look at the type of man he actually. Andrew and Miller are on the same page. Okay, they're real men, and then you have people like me and Trevor, and it's like
2 kids.
Two kids, man. 2 wannabes, man. For real, man. Trevor, come on, man. Do you know how to build a birdhouse? Probably not, man. Probably not, buddy.
Yeah,
and Andrew does.
I got no skills, man. That's why I just talk hockey behind the mic.
Have you ever caught a fish? Are you a real man? Have you ever caught a fish before?
I've caught a fish before. Yeah, I've caught a few fish.
No way. What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. My dad was a fisherman, so I learned a few things, but I'm no master fisherman. That's for sure.
I spent the last 10 years teaching people how to fish.
Hey, there we go, Andrew. I know what we're doing this week. We're going fishing with Andrew, buddy. There we go.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's go. Andrew, I actually got another maybe non-hockey question to ask you a little bit later here, but we talk about MVPs and you know, you being the MVP, and maybe going fishing too. Let's tie it all together. What was the MVP of off-season moves for the Vancouver Canucks? I mean, Alvian went fishing for a few targets, but what was your favorite move by the Canucks this season?
I was a little disappointed when we didn't get Gensel, but after I did a little bit of research of all the people we did pick up, I just think the depth the depth of having, you know, 3 lines deep at least, and then that 4th line being something that we could check and kind of throw out there in those situations. That's what really impressed me, was they didn't just peg-hold him or pigeonhole himself into one player where we spent most of our money, and then we're all next year like, yeah, we got Gensel, and then we suck. You know, I would rather have scoring across all 4 lines than just one. You know, look at McDavid. You know, sure, they have that one line that you put it out there and it's, I don't know, electric dynamite. You know, they go out there, they score, and they get their points. But if you don't have a solid third line going out there and checking and getting, you know, 20 goals or 30 goals in a year, you're never going to progress. You're going to get to game 7 and you're going to lose.
Yeah, no, that's true, man. That's true. Like the depth is something that we're gonna have to live by. I mean, versus the dream of having Gensel. I mean, I'm pretty high on Gensel, but at the end of the day, I don't know why the quantity feels so much like quality. I don't know if I'm just stroking Alvin's head top with that, like just literally like just patting him on the head and giving him a head massage, but something just tells me that it's gonna work out, and maybe I'm leaning towards that, technically speaking, because of the size of these contracts outside of Jake DeBrusk. Like everything just seems manageable, and if it doesn't work, they can get the F out of it, you know. And all that being said, I think that guys like Sherwood and Heinen, they kind of fit the mold of what Rick Tocchet is trying to do. And I kind of want to end the episode on this note, because, you know, I'm not going to front. I still listen to a lot of other people talk about the Canucks. And again, Thomas Drance was on the radio today, and he was talking about Rick Tocchet, and I think Halford or Bruff asked Drance about what Tocchet needs to do to not be stale during training camp, right? Because the message has to be somewhat different. So on that note, what do you think his messaging is going to be like this time around to not sound stale and to sound fresh and to sound I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, so for me, I think when you've heard Tocchet talk throughout this offseason, I think it's the team has the structure down, but how can they open things up offensively? So I do think the messaging is going to be something along the lines of, you know, let the offensive players flourish, let the creativity flourish. And back to Andrew's point about this being a deep team, you know, look, you know, obviously you have your stars in Miller and Pettersson and Besser, but you got a lot of talented guys on this team in general, right? Heinen's got talent, Sherwood's got talent, Sprong's got talent, Hoaglander's got talent. There's talent throughout this team, right? And not to mention Garland and Joshua, one of the best duos in the NHL last season. So I think Tocchet, it's going to be more so about building trust with his players, giving them the confidence to go out there and go capitalize offensively, because they got the structure down. They know how to play defense now, which was a huge, huge learning curve compared to where we were this time here. And now it's about finding ways to go capitalize offensively and creating more of their own luck. I mean, through the halfway point of last season, sure, they led the NHL in goals, but they were, you know, bottom of the league in terms of shots, right? They can actually create more of their own luck next season. If they do that, I believe they can be one of the best teams in the NHL.
For me, it's chemistry. It's every Hank has his Dank, every McDavid has his Draisaitl. It's about finding that guy that you're going to play with and building that bond. You know, look at Miller and Besser since they've become line mates full time. They've torn it up, both of them. And I feel like this year coming up, we're going to have more than just 2 Canucks having record years. I think we're going to have 4 lines having record years.
Wow, you know what? Those are great answers from both of you guys, because I feel as if you want to be fresh in a hockey sense, the most exciting way to do so is letting the guys do what they've dreamt of doing, or do what instilled so much love for the game, and that's playing offense, you know, like scoring goals. And if Tocchet leans into that, I have no doubt in my mind that he won't become stale and his messaging will still go through. Hey, speaking of messaging, one love to Andrew for hopping on to deliver his message to the people. One love to all of our fans on the Locked On Canucks side. It's been an effing blessing, okay, for real. Trevor and I living the dream every day, and it's because of you and you and you and you and you and you and the West Coast Bias, for real, okay? One love to Locked On Canucks and the Don't Doze Art Lab. Hit the like button, subscribe to the show. I don't know if Andrew is actually like a fishing tutor, and if you want to like shout out a company that you work for or something, like there you go. If you want to learn how to fish, message Andrew. You want to message Andrew, join the Discord, okay? Link in the bio. Catch a fish, cook the fish, impress your girl, okay? For real. Trevor Beggs, sign us out.
Yeah, all right. Shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, and those of you who join us on the live show on YouTube, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening. it don't matter. We just appreciate you for tuning in to Locked on Canucks. I got one last quick question for Andrew. If Kyle and I are going to go bush camping this weekend, where should we go, buddy?
West
Oh
Harrison.
yeah.
West Harrison. Okay, beautiful. There we go.
Yeah,
It was on the list,
there you
Kyle.
go.
Now it's determined.
Thanks, boys.
Let's go. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks
maybe
for having
we'll
me,
see you
eh?
there, buddy.
Hey, give me a call.
Hey,
All
there you
right,
go.
that was
That
another episode
dope.
of Locked On Canucks, but we got to get out of here. That was Andrew. That other guy was Kyle Bowen. I'm Trevor Beggs. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On Canucks.